So for a minute, contemplate the qualities of great compassion and wisdom that knows all conventional and ultimate truths. What would it be like to have those kind of qualities? And then imagine those qualities appearing in the form of Shakyamuni Buddha. He's sitting on a lotus, well, a throne, and then a lotus and sun and moon seats. His body made of golden light. And he's looking at you with compassion and total acceptance. He's surrounded by all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, Arhats, Dakas and Dakinis, Dharma protectors. In short, you're sitting in the presence of a huge assembly of holy beings, all of whom wish you well and want to help you so you can realize the path. Around you are all the sentient beings of all the realms, all of whom want happiness, not suffering. And who are counting on us to help them. And so as we do the various recitations, let's think that we're leading all these sentient beings in generating these virtuous thoughts. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Reverently I prostrate with body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I confess several destructive actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the virtues of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until cyclic existence ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate all the virtues of myself and others to the Great Awakening. This ground anointed with perfume, flower-strewn Mount Meru, four lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. The objects of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, friends, enemies, and strangers, my body, wealth, and enjoyments, I offer these without any sense of loss. Please accept them with pleasure and inspire me and others to be free from the three poisonous attitudes. Holy Gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. And think that a duplicate of the Buddha emerges from the Buddha in front and sits on your crown, facing the same direction as you do. And similarly, more duplicates emerge from the Buddha in front and sit on the heads of all the other sentient beings all around you. And so the Buddha petitions on our behalf as we make requests to the merit field. Glorious and precious Root Guru, sit upon the lotus and moon seat on my crown, guiding me with your great kindness. Bestow upon me the attainments of your body, speech, and mind. Through the scriptures are seen supreme doors for the fortunate who walk us over to spiritual freedom, illuminators whose wise means vibrate with compassion. To the entire line of spiritual mentors, I make request. And as we recite the Buddha's mantra, light and nectar flow from the Buddha on our crown, the Buddhas on the crowns of the heads of all sentient beings, flowing into us, performing two functions: one, purifying our negativities, and the second, inspiring our mind and bringing us the realizations of the path. Taya ta muni muni maha muni asoha. Taya ta muni muni maha muni asoha. Taya ta muni muni maha muni asoha. Taya ta Mahamuni Muni Mahamuni Soha Taya Ta Muni Muni Mahamuni Soha Taya Ta Muni Muni Mahamuni Soha Taya Ta Muni Muni Mahamuni Soha. And then contemplate and request to the Guru Buddha the fact that I and all other sentient beings have been born in samsara and are endlessly subjected to various kinds of intense dukkha is due to our failure to cultivate the 3 higher trainings correctly once we have developed the aspiration for liberation. Guru Buddha, please inspire me and all sentient beings so that we may cultivate the 3 higher trainings correctly once we have developed the aspiration for liberation. Continue to contemplate. By all means, may I attain the state of a Guru Buddha that frees me from the root of all of samsara's suffering. For that purpose, may I correctly train in the qualities that are the 3 precious higher trainings. In particular, may I correctly guard the ethical disciplines to which I have committed myself, even at the cost of my life, since guarding them is beneficial and failing to do so is extremely harmful. Regarding how to keep the ethical disciplines, 1, since ignorance is a door to transgressions of precepts, as its antidote, may I hear and learn about the precepts. 2, since disrespect is a door to transgressions, as its antidote, may I respect the guide, the Buddha, the precepts he established, and those of pure conduct, my companions who train well in the precepts. 3, since carelessness is a door to transgressions, as its antidote, may I cultivate the mindfulness and introspective awareness, integrity and consideration for others, and conscientiousness. 4, since an abundance of afflictions is a door to transgressions, having meditated on ugliness as the remedy to attachment, on love as the remedy to anger, and on dependent arising as the remedy to ignorance, may I correctly train in order to make my ethical discipline pure and unsullied by transgressions. Guru Buddha, please inspire me to be able to do so. In response to your requesting the Guru Buddha, 5-colored light and nectar stream from all the parts of his body into you through the crown of your head. The light and nectar absorb into your body and mind, and also into the bodies and minds of all the sentient beings around you. purifying all negativities and obscurations accumulated since beginningless time. And especially purifying all illness, spirit interferences, negativities, and obscurations that interfere with correctly developing the good qualities that are the 3 higher trainings. Your body becomes translucent, the nature of light. All your good qualities, lifespan, merit, and so forth, expand and increase. Having generated the aspiration for liberation, think that a superior realization of correct cultivation of the 3 higher trainings has arisen in your mind stream and in the mind streams of others. Okay, so in the previous weeks we had contemplated the first 2 of the 4 truths for Aryans, true dukkha, or the unsatisfactory conditions that we live in as being beings in cyclic existence, and also the true origin, or the causes, ignorance, afflictions, polluted karma, that produce all these unsatisfactory circumstances. So we had, contemplated that, and by repeatedly contemplating that, you can generate a very strong wish to attain liberation from that. Yeah. And we have to be convinced that attaining liberation is possible. Okay. And so His Holiness always stresses this, yeah? And so, to really see how ignorance controls so much of our mental processes and our behavior, and how these mental states and these behaviors, the karma we create, lead to our unpleasant and unhappy situations. And then really gaining conviction that ignorance is a misapprehends phenomena. In other words, it's a wrong consciousness. And when we have some idea, what the object ignorance apprehends does not exist at all, then we can begin to see that generating the wisdom that understands reality can be a direct antidote to that ignorance. Okay, so if ignorance is apprehending something that's non-existent, like inherent existent people and phenomena, if wisdom sees things as empty of inherent existence, because wisdom is a correct consciousness, it can overpower the ignorance, which is a wrong consciousness. When the ignorance ceases, then the afflictions cease, then the polluted karma ceases, then the true dukkha ceases. Okay? So, you know, to really understand this, we have to have some feeling for emptiness to gain that kind of conviction. But when we do, then, you know, we're very confident not only that samsara stinks, but that it's possible to get out of it. If you only think samsara stinks, but you're not sure you can get out of it, then you're in a really bad situation. So we have to have that confidence that, you know, there exists a state beyond samsara, the third noble truth, true cessations, and there exists a path to get to that state, which is the fourth truth for the Aryas, the true paths. Okay, so the wisdom consciousnesses. Okay, so then when we have that confidence, you know, there's a way to get out of it, to attain to true cessations by practicing true paths. Then the next question is, well, what are the true paths that we practice? So these are the summarized in terms of the 3 higher trainings. Okay, they're called higher. One reason they're called higher is because you do them with having taken refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. You know, they become really higher trainings when you become an Arya. But at least, you know, having refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So those 3 trainings that we practice, first one is ethical discipline, ethical conduct. Second is concentration. Third is wisdom. Okay, so these 3 come in all the Buddhist traditions. They all talk about these 3 higher trainings and their importance. So we're going to talk about these 3. We're going to start out with the first one, the higher training in ethical conduct. And so here, because this is in the Lam Rim, we're talking about practicing in common with beings of middle-level capacity. So the kinds of precepts that beings of middle-level capacity take are the pratimoksha precepts, or the precepts of individual liberation. People don't take the bodhisattva or tantric precepts until they are practicing the path of advanced capacity beings. Okay? But here, this is the 3 higher trainings are taught in the context of practicing in common with middle-level capacity beings. Okay? So the pratimoksha precepts. Now, first we have to ask, well, why are there precepts? Yeah, why don't we just like stop doing negative actions, and why can't that be just as good? Well, yeah, it is just as good. But the problem is that it's hard for us just to stop our negative actions, because we've already gone through, you know, in the path in common with the initial capacity beings, abandoning the 10 non-virtues, you know, and that's already pretty hard. And if we look, we don't necessarily do that so well. So taking precepts is a real way to set ourselves on that path, because when we take precepts, we're doing it in a quote, quote, public ceremony, in the sense that there is a teacher, and we've requested the teacher, please, to give us refuge in the 3 jewels, to give us the precepts, and then we do it by visualizing the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha in the space in front, and repeating the refuge formula and the formula for taking precepts after our teacher. Yeah, and then you imagine that you've really received the precepts. And when you have the precepts, it gives you so much more internal strength to avoid negativities. Yeah, when we just say, well, it would be really nice if I didn't, if I stopped lying. It was good. I really should stop lying. But then, you know how it is. Then when there's a convenient situation where you can gain something by lying, then we lie. Whereas if you take a precept, in the presence of the Buddha, in the presence of your teacher, then it's a little you take your resolve a little bit more seriously. And it's like, well, I promised the Buddha, I promised my teacher I wasn't going to do this. I better keep my promise, you know? And also realizing that when we take precepts, we're making a promise to ourselves. So it's not just an aspiration, but you know, it's something stronger than an aspiration. It's like, I'm really going to try hard to do this. Of course, if we could keep the precepts perfectly, we wouldn't need to take them. Yeah, so taking them, you know, we take them because we can't keep them perfectly, but we have to have some confidence that we can keep them, you know, to a reasonable extent, and some inspiration to do that. So nobody forces us to take precepts. It's something done completely voluntarily, that comes from our own wisdom. You know, and really sitting down and thinking, well, if I continue, like if we start with the 5 lay precepts, you know, to abandon killing, taking what isn't freely given, unwise and unkind sexual behavior, lying and intoxicants, then we just do a little life review, okay? Well, what's happened when I've killed sentient beings? Or what would happen, you know, maybe I've just killed insects, but animals is bad enough, you know. My 21st birthday, they took me out to have a lot of fun. We picked out live lobsters and dropped them in the hot water. You know, I have so much regret for that. You know, we thought, oh, this is what fun thing to do. But then, you know, you think, well, even killing a human being, what would happen if I did that, you know? I mean, that would be really awful. And you think, well, all the other times that I've killed, do I really want to keep acting like that, doing like that? And then you begin to see, well, no, you know, I'm harming others. And when I harm others, I harm myself. I create negative karma. Yeah? And how about taking things that haven't been given to us, freely given to us, you know? Then what happens when I do that? Well, then nobody trusts me to be around their stuff, you know, because I just take this and that and the other thing whenever I feel like having something. So nobody's going to trust me. I could get in trouble with the law. Yeah, I might make some extra money, but is it really worth it? How do I feel about myself when I act that way? Yeah, similarly with unkind and unwise sexual behavior. You know, if I sleep around, you know, of course, you know, my spouse and the other person's spouse aren't going to find out about it, so we think, but of course they usually do. Then what happens to your marriage? What happens to the children? Do your children trust you after they find out, you know, that you've been sleeping around? When you use people for your own sexual satisfaction without caring about them, what happens to those people? When you have unprotected sex, what happens to yourself, to the other person? You know, so we begin to think about these things. And then from our own experience, you know, in looking at these situations, and from our own examination, really thinking deeply about them, then we come to conclude, I really don't want to do those things. So then when you take a precept, what you're doing is saying, I'm not going to do the things I don't want to do anyway. Okay, so, and I really want to emphasize that, because lots of people think, oh, you take precepts, then you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do the other thing, and oh, you're just suffering all the time because you can't do all these things. But no, it's not like that. It's through your own examination and experience, you've decided, I don't want to do those things. But sometimes I'm weak-minded, so I want to take a precept because that will give me the structure and framework and inner strength to not do what I don't want to do. Okay? So precepts are very valuable in that way. Also, when we take precepts, we accumulate a lot of merit, and we purify a lot of negativity. That is, and those two things are not done without the precept. Okay, so for example, if there's two people sitting in the room and one person has the precept, let's say, to not kill, the other person doesn't have the precept. Both of them are sitting here in the room, neither one of them are killing. But the first person who has the precept is constantly cultivating, accumulating merit, because they're keeping the precept. Because, you know, they made this determination, they're not going to do that, they're following through with it. So every moment, even if they're sleeping, they're accumulating the merit of not killing. Whereas the other person who hasn't taken that precept is not accumulating that merit. Okay? Also, you know, remember when we studied the different results of karma? One of them was the tendency to do the action again, and how we were saying that that's really the worst of the results, because, you know, you just keep doing it, so you accumulate more and more negative karma. And so when you have a precept, again, you're consciously stopping the ripening of that karmic result of the habituation to do the action again. Yeah, and so you're really purifying that habit, that tendency that we may have had for, you know, many, many lifetimes, even many, many eons. So keeping precepts like this brings so many benefits when we do that. So that's why the Buddha, you know, set up these things of precepts. So the pratimoksha, or individual liberation precepts, are the group that we're talking about here in the context of the 3 higher trainings. And they consist of 8 kinds, okay? 8 types of pratimoksha precepts. Okay, so you start out with the one-day precepts. Okay, so these are 8 one-day precepts that you just keep for 24 hours. You take it in the morning, keep it for 24 hours. Okay, then there's the 5 lay precepts that you take for life. Then there's the and the 5 lay precepts that you take for life are divided into male and female. Okay, so you have there's 8 kinds. The first kind is the 8 precepts. Then the male and female 5 lay precepts. Then the male and female novice monastic precepts. Then the training precepts for a nun. And then the last 2 are the full precepts, again, for both male and female. Okay, so those are the 8 types of pratimoksha precepts. The 8 precepts, these are not the Mahayana precepts. The precepts sound alike, but the Mahayana precepts you take with a bodhicitta motivation. These precepts you take at least with the motivation of renunciation of samsara. So you don't have to be practicing the bodhisattva path to be able to take the 8 one-day precepts. So even though the listing of the precepts is very similar, it's not the same as the 8 Mahayana precepts. Okay? And another reason is that when you take the pratimoksha precepts, if you've taken higher levels of those precepts, then you aren't allowed to take the lower levels, because you've already taken them and you have a higher level of precepts. Okay? So I think the only thing that would not be in line with that would be the case of the male and female lay followers who have the 5 precepts. They can take the 8 one-day precepts. Okay, so let's start with listing the 5 precepts, okay? To abandon killing, stealing, unwise and unkind sexual behavior, lying, taking intoxicants. Those are the 5, okay? If you take the 8, then the 3rd one, because you're only taking the 8 for one day, then it's a little bit stricter. Then the 3rd one becomes celibacy. So for 24 hours you're celibate. Then you add 3 more onto that, okay? So you add not sitting on higher expensive seats or beds, and then not wearing, using perfumes, ornaments, garlands, or singing, dancing, playing music, going to entertainment, and not eating after midday. Okay, and so that's done just for the one day. Yeah. Then when you take the novice precepts, okay, the novice precepts have 10. That one that was singing, dancing, playing music becomes 1. And then the other part of it, of using perfumes, ornaments, and garlands, becomes another 1. And then you add onto it not handling money or precious, gold, silver, jewelry, valuable things. Okay, so that becomes the 10 novice precepts. That's Shramanera or Shramaneri. Okay, the 5 lay is Upasaka and Upasika. Okay, then then for women there's another ordination before full ordination. It's called Shikshamana, which means training. It's a training ordination. And so this one from the Dharmaguptaka school, the Vinaya school we follow, it has 6 precepts, which are just the same as the Shramanarika precepts, except you keep them really, really strictly. Okay, so they're to abandon killing, stealing, to be celibate, to abandon lying, abandon intoxicants, and to not eat after midday. Okay, so those are the 6 for the probationary nun. Then for the fully ordained monk and nun, then there's more precepts. Okay, so in the Dharmaguptaka, the men have, I think, 227. And in Pali they have 227, I know. I think 227, the women we have 348. For the Mula Sravastivada, the monks have 253, and the women have 364. Yeah, we can look it up. It's in Buddhism, one teacher, many traditions. Yeah. Okay, what's interesting, maybe I should talk a little bit about this now, is there's different Vinaya traditions. When the Buddha taught, he just taught Vinaya. But then, as the teachings spread, they went to different geographical areas, and so different schools got established, and transportation and communication, wasn't so active then, so they couldn't find out what they were doing, and all the precepts were passed down orally for several hundred years. So there came to be these different Vinaya traditions. Considering that it was an oral tradition for many centuries, there's remarkably little difference between the traditions. Okay, but you do have some things, like in the enumeration, let's say, of the full precepts for monks or nuns. There's some difference in how you enumerate them, or some difference in how you describe them. But they're not, like huge, enormous things. Okay, yeah. So those are the 8 types of pratimoksha. Right now there's only, at the beginning they say there were 18 different schools. Actually, when you look at the list, there were many more than 18. But nowadays there's only 3 that are extant, and so you only have these 3 Vinaya lineages. So the first one is the Theravada, or the Pali one, and so that exists in Sri Lanka, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, parts of Vietnam, and parts of the West. Then there's the Dharmaguptaka lineage, and that one exists in China, Taiwan, Korea, parts of Vietnam, also the West. And then there's the Mula Sravastivada, which that's the tradition followed in Tibet, Mongolia, and the Himalaya regions. Okay? Of these 3, the only one that still has the lineage of full ordination for women is the Dharmaguptaka. Yeah, and so that's the one we follow, so that all of the nuns here can be fully ordained, because we think it's important to have the full ordination. So in Thailand, in Sri Lanka, they began to give the full ordination in the late around 2000. They began to give it. They're going to have the first ordination in Thailand this year, even though some Thai women have gone to Sri Lanka and taken it before. In the Tibetan system, there is no full ordination for women. There's a lot of talk about restoring it, but unlike in the Theravada tradition, it hasn't been restored. And so all of us have gone to Taiwan to take it. Some people will go to Vietnam to take it too, or to a Chinese temple, in the US or somewhere in the West. Okay. Any questions about that so far? Yeah.
There's a question online about the Anagarika ordination.
Yes.
And how that fits into.
Okay, so how does Anagarika fit in? Anagarika is the 8 precepts when you take them for a longer period of time than one day. Okay, so for example, here at the Abbey, when people come before they ordain, they take the Anagarika precepts, they take the 8 precepts, and they keep them around a year. But instead of taking them every morning and doing the ceremony every morning, we do the ceremony once, and they say from now until like the next year, whatever date, however long they're going to keep them, then they say that date, and then they have the precepts for that long. Okay, and Anagarika is a really good way, I think, for people to practice and to prepare if they're interested in monastic ordination, because it's 8 precepts. You have the main things, but you still can handle money, and at the Abbey, people wear a uniform of sorts, but there are also people who are out in society with the 8 precepts. So it's an individual choice, but especially if you're thinking about ordaining, taking the 8 precepts first is a very good way to train and see how you feel about living in precepts. Yeah, it's very, very helpful. There are other questions so far? Yeah.
I didn't catch one thing.
Uh-huh.
I just want to make sure. A person who wants to take the 8 Mahayana precepts, do they need to have any precepts?
If you want to take the 8 Mahayana precepts, you don't have to have any of the Pratimoksha precepts first to do that. You need to take refuge before you can take the 8 Mahayana precepts. Okay, anything else? Shall we go on? Okay, so then in the part that we read from the text, when you were still meditating, there it talks about 4 ways, 4 factors through which we often transgress our precepts. Okay, so ignorance is the first one. Yeah, so ignorance means, we don't really understand what the precepts are. We don't understand what constitutes keeping the specific precepts we've taken, what constitutes breaking them, what constitutes a root transgression, what constitutes a minor transgression. So if you are ignorant of the precepts and you don't know these things, and what constitutes transgression or what constitutes keeping them, then it's very easy to transgress precepts. So the antidote to that first one of ignorance is to hear about the precepts and to learn about the precepts. Okay, so you can see how that's the antidote. So this is actually quite important because I've seen people have what I call ordination fever. They want to get ordained really badly, so quickly. And they get ordained. Somebody gives them the ordination. They put on the robes, they shave their head, and then they don't bother to learn the precepts. Because they were just so focused on getting ordained that they didn't think about, well, what do you do after you're ordained? Yeah. Like, what does getting ordained entail? Well, you're taking some precepts. What are those precepts? You have to learn them. Yeah, you have to know how to keep them and what constitutes a break and how to repair them if you have transgressed them. Yeah, so, it's really important to learn these kinds of things. And it's up to you to request somebody to teach you, or request somebody, please tell me what books to read that will explain these kinds of things. Okay. Then the second one is, since disrespect is a door to transgressions, as its antidote, may I respect the guide, in other words, the Buddha, the precepts he established, and those of pure conduct, my companions who train well in the precepts. Okay? So if we don't respect the Buddha, then we think, who cares about these precepts? Buddha gave those precepts. Who cares? I don't have any special respect for the Buddha. Yeah? Or if you don't respect the precepts themselves, and you say, why did he make all these precepts? Some of them are pretty strange, like what's the big deal about drinking? Why are these people so uptight? Yeah. So, being disrespectful of the precepts themselves, or being disrespectful of people who keep pure conduct, our Dharma friends on the path. So those could be other lay practitioners, but they can especially be monastics. So if you have a very scornful attitude towards monastics, like, look at these people, what do they think they're doing? Why are they can't do this and they can't do that, and they think they're so special just because they can't do things. Like having a very diminutive attitude of them. Or, and I've heard people say this, oh, these monastics, they're keeping celibacy because they can't, they don't want to face their sexuality, and they don't want to, they don't know how to be in intimate relationships. Okay, so that kind of disrespecting of the Sangha, the monastics, is really quite heavy. And you can see that if somebody has that attitude, they're not going to keep the precepts themselves because they think, oh, this is all very stupid. Yeah, so it's actually quite ignorant. Yeah, the disrespect comes from a lot of ignorance, and it's very, very harmful for the person. So as an antidote to that, then we try and cultivate respect for the Buddha as the enlightened one, And it's funny, some of the people who criticize monastics who have precepts, they're Buddhist, but they seem to have forgotten that the Buddha himself was a monastic. Yeah, so you have to be pretty careful about this, yeah? But if you really respect the Buddha, then you think, well, the Buddha chose to keep precepts. Even though he was already a fully awakened one, he chose that lifestyle. Why? Yeah? Why did our teacher, the Buddha, choose to keep precepts? It wasn't because he had nothing better to do with his time. Yeah, it wasn't because he was suppressing his sexuality and didn't know how to be intimate. You know, I think it's hilarious when people say that. But, you know, why did the Buddha do that? You know, because living a disciplined life is a natural outflow of having a liberated mind. Yeah? I mean, you aren't going to attain liberation and then create all sorts of non-virtue, are you? You can't do that. So having precepts is just a natural expression of a liberated mind. And for those of us who want to attain a liberated mind, because we don't have one yet, then keeping precepts is the way for us to approach being like the Buddha. Yeah, the Buddha's saying, this is what I did. And we're saying, I want to do the same thing as you did because you're my role model. I want to become like you. And so we respect the Buddha, we cultivate respect for the precepts themselves, and we cultivate respect for people who keep pure conduct, you know, who are good role models, who can be good companions for us on the path. And again, that's so important, you know. It's like if we want to have good ethical discipline, we have to hang around people who have good ethical discipline. You know, because just as our parents always told us, birds of a feather flock together, and we're going to become like our friends. So if you hang out with people who drink and drug, you're going to drink and drug eventually. You know, if you hang out around people who are sleeping around, you're going to start sleeping around. If you hang out around people who do, you know, under-the-table business deals, they'll get you involved in their business deals. Okay? So, you know, if we really respect people who have good contact, whether they're lay people or whether they're monastics, then they become an incredible support system for us. They become our role models, they become our companions that help to guide us, you know, because when we're around them, we all do the same thing together and we reinforce and support each other. So that's one of the reasons why the Buddha set up the Sangha community, where people, you know, practice and support and help each other, so we all go in the same direction. Okay, so cultivating respect is the second antidote. Then the third, says, since carelessness is a door to transgression, as its antidote, may I cultivate mindfulness and introspective awareness, integrity and consideration for others, and conscientiousness. Okay? So carelessness, yeah, is a door to transgression because we're just reckless. Yeah? And what we have in our mind is the opposite of these five. Yeah? We don't have any mindfulness of our precepts. We've forgotten them. We have no introspective awareness that is monitoring what we're saying and doing and thinking. Yeah. We don't have integrity in our mind at that time, so we don't really care about our own ethical conduct. We don't have consideration for others at that time, so we don't care how our non-virtuous action affects other people. And we don't have conscientiousness because we just don't even value ethical conduct at all. Okay? So this one of carelessness, you have, you know, these five mental factors that are the opposite of the 5 virtuous ones. You know, when we've studied mind and mental factors, if you look in there, you'll find most of them there in the 20 auxiliary afflictions. So what we do to counteract them, first we cultivate mindfulness. So mindfulness is a mind that remembers what our precepts are, remembers what our values are, and so that we can live by them. Introspective awareness is the second one, and that is a mental factor that checks, what am I doing? Am I living according to my precepts? Am I living according to my values? Or am I, you know, acting in any kind of, you know, am I in la-la land doing all sorts of inappropriate behavior? Okay. Yeah, so those two, you can see the functions that they play in helping us to keep good ethical conduct, because we have to remember our precepts and values, and then we have to recognize whether or not we're following them or not. Then the next one is integrity. Some people translate this as shame, and I really disagree with that translation, because the word shame in English has several different meanings. One of the meanings of shame in English is virtuous, in the sense of you know, I can do better than this. Yeah, but most of the time in the West, when people hear the word shame, they don't think of that wholesome mind that says, you know, I can do better than this. It thinks of a mind that says, I'm defective goods, you know, I'm worthless. So that's why I don't agree with translating this as shame, because too often people can misunderstand it and think, oh, and you know, I have to feel shame, I have to feel guilty, and that will keep me from breaking the precepts. But shame and guilt are not wholesome mental factors to cultivate. So instead, I prefer the translation of integrity. Integrity meaning that you have a sense of self-respect, and because you care about yourself, because you care about your own Dharma practice, then you abandon negative actions. Okay, so that's a wholesome mental factor to have. You know, and it's based on caring about ourselves and respecting ourselves. Its friend, consideration for others, yeah, has the same function of abandoning negativity, but consideration for others thinks, if I act in a harmful way, how will that affect other living beings? You know, I will directly harm them, and also they will lose faith in me. They might even lose faith in the Dharma if they see somebody like me acting in a totally, you know, non-virtuous way. And I care about the effect of my actions on other people. I really care about how my actions influence others. Okay, so those two, you know, integrity and consideration for others are another pair that really help us to keep good ethical conduct. So we want to cultivate those, you know, to care about ourselves and, you know, what kind of karma we're creating, and to care about others and how we influence them. Then the fifth one mentioned here is conscientiousness. And conscientiousness is a mind that cares about ethical conduct, yeah, that appreciates ethical conduct, that, yeah, cares about it, so, and wants to observe it. So, again, to create, to, you know, to consciously generate conscientiousness by thinking of the value and importance of keeping ethical conduct, what its results are, what its benefits are. Yeah, and then in that way we really develop respect for ethical conduct and an aspiration to keep it, and we, you know, it's something important in our lives. And you can see, you know, if you're around people who have good ethical conduct, we feel more comfortable. I don't know about you, but at least I do. You know, if I'm around somebody who doesn't kill, I feel safe. If I'm around somebody who doesn't steal, again, I can leave my belongings around. I don't have any fear. You know, if I'm around people who keep celibacy, then I don't have to worry about people making a pass or trying to chat me up or who knows what. Yeah. If I'm around people who don't lie, then I can trust what they say. And that really puts my mind at ease if I can trust people. Whereas, you know, when you're constantly thinking, is that person telling me the truth? I mean, then it becomes very difficult to be close to that person because some basic fundamental trust is missing. Okay? Same with taking intoxicants, you know. If I hang around people who are taking intoxicants, I'm never quite sure who I'm going to meet when I go see them. Because I could meet somebody who's not intoxicated that day, or I could meet somebody who's drunk, or I could meet somebody who's high on meth, or I could meet somebody who's zonked out on heroin. You know, you don't know who your friend is going to be that day. Yeah, and then of course you get dragged into all the stuff that they're doing. Yeah, so it's just much, you know, who our friends are is really, really important, you know, to keeping precepts. Then the fourth one here is, since an abundance of afflictions is a door to transgressions, having meditated on ugliness as the remedy to attachment, love as the remedy to anger, and dependent arising as the remedy to ignorance, may I correctly train in order to make my ethical discipline pure and unsullied by transgressions. Okay? So when we have an abundance of afflictions, sometimes we may know our precepts. Yeah? And we may even respect the precepts and the Buddha and everything. And we may not be careless, but our minds are just overwhelmed by an affliction at a certain time. You ever had that happen? One part of you is saying, I don't want to do this, I don't want to say this. And there you go, and you do it, you know, because the mind is overwhelmed by afflictions. Okay, so that's a door to transgression. So we have to learn to get a handle on our afflictions. So one of the afflictions that often overwhelms us is attachment. You know, I want this now, or as soon as possible. I've got to have this. When you think about the ugly aspects of whatever it is you're craving, then the object doesn't seem so desirable. And that helps you overcome the attachment. Okay? Anger is another one. We get really wrapped up with our anger, and it overwhelms us. Who knows what we say and do? Okay? The antidote to that is developing fortitude and developing loving kindness. Okay, so if we take time to meditate on fortitude, to meditate on loving kindness, it helps us not be overwhelmed by anger. Sometimes we get overwhelmed by confusion. We're not sure what is virtuous. Should I do this? Should I do that? Is this virtuous? Is that virtuous? I don't really know. And we make bad decisions, you know, because we think that something's virtuous when it isn't. Okay, so to overcome that kind of confusion, then we meditate on dependent arising, because that helps us see the link between cause and effect. If you want this kind of effect, what kind of cause do you need to create? If you want happiness, what kind of non-virtues do you need to abandon? Yeah, if you don't want or if you want happiness, what kind of virtues do you need to cultivate? If you don't want unhappiness, what kind of non-virtues do you need to abandon? Okay. So you know, learning the antidotes to the afflictions is very, very helpful to prevent that kind of transgression. Okay. So I want to pause again if there's any questions here with what we've covered so far.
This comes from the first part, actually, I missed the question.
That's okay.
Okay, so this person is asking, where does the energy of the purification come from that causes accumulation of merit when we formally take precepts and keep them? Is it from intention and the inherent wisdom of our own mind?
So the question in short is, how do we develop the intention to keep precepts?
No, it's where does the energy of purification come from?
What does the energy of purification come from?
Where does it?
But what does that mean?
I mean, I guess what? I don't know. Maybe the question is, what causes the accumulation of merit when we formally take precepts and keep them? So is it from, what causes the purification and accumulation of merit?
Oh, what causes the purification and accumulation of merit when you take and keep precepts?
Yeah, is it our intention or our inherent wisdom?
It's our intention and following through with what our intention is. Yeah, so we have the intention to abandon certain non-virtues, and then we actively abandon those. So that purifies the tendency to do it again, and it prevents us from creating non-virtue. We have the intention to act in the opposite way of, let's say, killing or stealing or whatever. So with that intention, again, we carry through with that, and we create virtue by doing that. Or just even by abandoning not doing the negativities, that itself both purifies and accumulates merit. So whoever asked that question, was the answer I gave what you were asking? Because I'm not sure I understood the question totally.
There's a lag, so...
Yeah, there's a lag. So we'll go to the next question, and they can let us know.
Someone asked, even though you might want to, but are temporarily physically incapable of keeping the precept about not eating after midday, can you still create merit on those days by keeping the other 7 precepts?
Okay. So if you're physically incapable of keeping the precept of not eating after midday, can you still create merit by keeping the other 7? Yes, you can. The thing is, the ordination, the one-day ordination, you take all 8 precepts. So what you would do in that case is, if you really couldn't keep one, you wouldn't take the precepts in an official kind of ceremony, but what you would do is in the morning make a very, very strong determination to yourself, I'm not going to do these 7 actions and for the next day, and make a very, very strong intention. Yeah, but when you take an ordination, you can't say, I take all of them, but not this one, and not that one, and not the other one. Yeah, they always come together as a set.
And is the power of merit the same?
Is what?
The power of merit the same?
Is the power, of doing it that way the same? I think it's going to be more powerful if you are able to take the precepts, but still the whole thing, because it talks about in Abbey Dharma, if you have a very strong intention to do something or to not do something, it creates a specially strong karma. So it definitely will be stronger than just not having that strong intention or determination.
And that person said the answer was great.
Oh, the answer was okay. That's good. Okay.
When you're overwhelmed by afflictions and you can't tell if it's maybe attachment or confusion, is there like a go-to antidote if you're not sure which one's the best?
Okay, so if you're not sure if you're suffering from attachment or confusion, what do you do? Can you give me an example?
Let's say you're No, I can't think of a good example, but I will remember this and I'll think of one and write it down for next time.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because it's helpful to be able to see, you know, to be able to identify what is the affliction in my mind, so we can apply the proper antidote. If we can't identify the affliction, or if we don't know the proper antidote, then we may apply the wrong thing and then get more upset, you know, or more confused than we were before. Okay.
In that case, it sounds like it's probably confusion, because I don't know what's virtuous and what's not virtuous.
Yeah, if you don't, yeah, that's what confusion is. Yeah.
Okay.
What is virtuous? What is non-virtuous? What should I do? I don't know. Yeah. And so then that's where, if you have that kind of confusion, then really studying about karma can be very helpful. Or, you know, a book like The Wheel of Sharp Weapons can be extremely helpful, because it talks about, you know, what kind of actions create what kind of results. There's a sutra called the Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish that talks about it. Also, yeah, studying about karma, studying about refuge. You know, if you learn about the refuge visualization, then that also talks to you about, it also describes like what kind of negativities we may have created in relationship to our spiritual mentors and the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So that gives us some idea of things that we want to abandon that are negative. If you read the confession prayer and the prostrations to the 35 Buddhas, there are certain things we're confessing there. So it lists them out, and then we say, oh, okay, then we know those are negative. So, yeah, some of those things are ways for us to learn. But then it's helpful not just to, you know, say, have a whole list of things that are negative, but to really understand, you know, and really look like, okay, if somebody does this, you know, why did the Buddha say that this is going to bring a suffering result? And you really sit and think about it. You know, what kind of mind state does that action? Yeah, where's that going to take me if I think like that, if I act like that, if I speak like that? Yeah, and then you can really start to develop your own wisdom about many of these things. Yeah, you know, because you can see, yeah, you get in touch with your own mind stream, and you can begin to tell what a non-virtuous mind stream feels like.
Some of mine as well is not willing to admit that it's attachment. You know, coming up with, in my mind, very valid reasons.
Oh yes, oh yes, we all know that one. Yes, that's the book of excuses. 999,789,515 excuses why this isn't really attachment. Yeah, so. You know, after a while when you practice, you can see when your mind's making up an excuse. Yeah. Yeah. But then it's a thing, well, do you have the strength at that moment to kind of say, to really say, yes, this is an excuse, I've got to put it down. Or do you say, yes, this is an excuse, but it's really not that bad of an excuse, and it's only a little negativity, and it's not really harmful. Anyway, nobody else will know, so I have consideration for others, it won't affect them. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Following up on that, I always mix up consideration for others, attachment to reputation, and being people-pleasing.
Oh, yeah.
For the nth time, how to tell the difference?
Okay, for the nth time. How do you tell the difference between attachment to reputation, people-pleasing, and consideration for others? Okay. Consideration for others is you're looking and you're saying, if I do this non-virtuous action, how is that going to affect the people who know that I did it? You know? And will they lose faith in me and think I'm, you know, a totally non-virtuous person. And if they did that, would that harm their faith in the Buddha Dharma Sangha? They know I'm a Buddhist practitioner. If I get involved in this shady business deal, what are they going to think of Buddhists? You know, now of course, you know, not all Buddhists are Buddhas, and Buddhists make mistakes. But to really care, you know, like, gee, if I act this way, how are other people going to feel? Or even if people don't know I'm a Buddhist, then there's none of that. If I just act completely, you know, I'm totally inconsiderate to other people and bossy and pushy, how's that going to affect the people around me? They're not going to be very happy. And I care about these people. I don't want them to be unhappy. I don't want them to lose faith in the Dharma. I don't want them to, even they aren't Buddhists, I don't want them to lose faith in humanity. Because you know how it is. Sometimes somebody may see somebody do a very negative act, and they just get so depressed about the state of the world and humanity in general. And to think, you know, I don't want to be the cause for anybody to feel that way, because I care about others. Okay? So the thing about consideration for others is we care about others. The thing about attachment to reputation is we don't care about others. We care about ourselves. Yeah? And we want to have a good reputation because then we feel like we're good people. So we lack the ability to evaluate our own actions. We're focused outward for other people to tell us if we're a good person or a bad person. You know, so we don't really care about others. We're caring about ourselves, and we don't want them to think bad about us. Also, because if they think bad about us, they may not ask us out, they won't give us presents, they won't praise us to other people. I'll lose all sorts of worldly perks, I won't get a promotion. You know, it's like if they think bad about me, then my worldly life is going to be harmed. Okay, so can you see the difference between that and consideration for others? Similarly, people-pleasing is, you want to be, you know, Pollyanna and goody two-shoes, you know, kind of all rolled into one because you're thinking what other people feel is my responsibility. So if they're upset, I am bad because I made them upset. And then again, you don't really care that they're upset. You just care about yourself feeling like a lousy person. So you want to please other people so that they'll like you, so that you won't torment yourself with your own guilt. Okay? So it's all kind of tangled up psychologically, you know, kind of really a mess. Yeah, it's like, I hate feeling guilty, but, you know, but the problem with people-pleasing is, the big mistake is we think that we're responsible for things that we're not responsible for. That's the problem with people-pleasing. Yeah? Of course, I want other people to be happy, but I cannot control whether they feel happy or not. So if I'm doing something virtuous and they're unhappy, there's no reason for me to regret what I did or to feel bad, because their unhappiness came from their mind, from their own confusion. Okay? So people-pleasing is this kind of contorted thing like, you know, I'm responsible for everybody else. I've got to make sure everybody's happy so that I don't get blamed. I've got to make sure everybody likes me so that I can think I'm a good person. I don't like hearing any criticism. So you can see that it's self-oriented in not a healthy way. Are you writing all this down?
Of course. Transcribing.
Put it on your computer screen. Yeah.
Many people are saying this is a very helpful explanation.
Oh. Okay. It's not just you, huh? Oh, okay.
It's a very hard one though. It seems like we're raised from that and it's really hard to tease that out.
It is. Because in many ways, especially women, we are raised to feel responsible for what other people feel. Men are not raised that way. You make somebody unhappy, too bad, tough luck. Women, we've got to make sure the family's okay, everybody's okay, the workplace is okay, check up with everybody, make sure everybody's happy, you know? And it's, yeah, it's in a very confused mindset, because it's not because we actually care that everybody's happy. There's some ulterior motive. But we are raised that way. And I know for myself, one of the big things that I had to work on in my practice, and I still have to keep very mindful of it, is what is my responsibility and what is not my responsibility. And to be very clear on that. Because when I'm not clear, then my relationships with other people are not clear. Yeah? And then there's all sorts of weird stuff that happens in relationships. Because when you're not clear about what's your responsibility and what isn't, then other people hook you all the time. You know? People say, well, I want you to do this, you should do this. And you get hooked by it, even though it's not something healthy in the relationship. Or even though it involves acting, you know, in a way that Dharma doesn't advise you to act in certain kind of relationships. But we get hooked because we feel guilty and responsible for things that are not our responsibility. And also, when we are like this, we disempower the other person. Yeah? Initially, to the other person, they may think we're being mean because they can't hook us. But we're actually, when we let them hook us, we're disempowering them. When we don't let them hook us, then they have to sit and think, what's my responsibility and what's not my responsibility? And how can I improve my own situation? Instead of sit there and say, oh, I'm helpless, you better do all these things for me because I'm unhappy, or I'm this, or I'm that. Yeah? And that's not helpful to the other person, to let them keep on thinking and acting like that. Yeah? Of course, like I said, sometimes they get mad at you. But hopefully, they'll figure it out at some point, that they're the ones that are responsible for, you know, certain aspects of what they're feeling. We can't control them. Yeah? Sometimes even if you wanted to, you could do 7 backflips and jump off the Grand Canyon, and you can't change what they're thinking or make them happy, you know?
Another question from online. What practices can we do to repent for bad actions we have done before we took the precepts, like killing insects, eating live prawns, etc.?
Okay, so how do we purify? Okay, so we discussed this a little bit under karma, but it's always very good to review. So there's the practice of the 4 opponent powers. Yeah, so the first one is to have regret, not guilt, but regret. Second is to I call it restore the relationship. What it means is to generate a positive attitude towards whoever it was that we acted negatively towards. Okay? So if we did something negative in relationship to our spiritual mentor or to Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, then we take refuge. If we did something negative towards or other sentient beings, then we generate love and compassion and bodhicitta. That's the second one. Third one is to make a determination not to do the action again, or at least not to do it for a certain period of time, and then to be really conscientious about that. And then fourth is to do some kind of remedial behavior. So this could be reciting the mantras of different Buddhas and visualizing the light and nectar coming from them, reciting the Buddha's names, bowing to like the 35 Buddhas, making offerings to the Triple Gem, publishing Dharma books for free distribution, doing volunteer work in a charity, doing volunteer work in a monastery or Dharma center, meditating on emptiness, meditating on bodhicitta, you know, any kind of virtuous action. Yeah. Volunteer work, it can be quite nice, I think, in many ways, yeah, as well as your Dharma practices. And so you do these 4 opponent powers, you know, repeatedly, and then at the end you really say to yourself, now I've purified these things. So you may not have purified them completely, but it's very helpful to think, now I've purified them. But you still have to do it many times. But, you know, it's a way actually is linked with self-forgiveness, I think. Yeah, when we finally are able to let something go. Mm-hmm.
What about doing something that you know will make someone else happy and it will not harm you?
What about something that you know that will make somebody else happy and will not harm you? Then fine. Yeah, unless you're doing something out of attachment, or doing something illegal, or, you know, yeah, you still have to use some wisdom about. Because lots of times, just because an action will, doing something will make somebody else happy, it doesn't mean that's a good thing to do. Because lots of times people are happy when, you know, when other people have done things that aren't so good to do. Yeah? Like you give an alcoholic some money, or you give them a bottle of booze, they're very happy. Does that mean that it's virtuous to give an alcoholic a bottle of booze? No. Okay? So you still have, just because it makes somebody happy doesn't mean it's good to do. You have to see what it is. Anything else?
If you're doing a longer remedial action, it takes longer, and you don't have the concentration to keep the thought in mind the whole time, you know, why you're doing it, is it good to just remember at the beginning and remember? Yeah,
like if you're doing prostrations or reciting Vajrasattva mantra or something, you may, you know, you don't necessarily have to be thinking every single instant, you know, I want to purify this action, I want to purify this action, I want to purify this action. Because you want to be doing the visualization, you want to be saying the Buddha's name or chanting the mantra. You want to really be feeling like you've purified. You know, if there's any remaining stuff inside you, that unclarity about that action, you want to think about it so you can really let it go. Yeah. So all that's involved in the remedial action. Okay. So I think that's it for this evening. Yeah, we finished ethical conduct, and then we'll go on a little bit to concentration, and then a little bit to wisdom to the Eightfold Noble Path. Okay. Oh, one more question?
Is it necessary or helpful to do the formal refuge and precept ceremony more than once?
Is it necessary or helpful to do the formal refuge and precept ceremony more than once? It's not necessary to do that. Some teachers say won't let you do it multiple times. Other people will let you do it multiple times. Personally speaking, I think for many people, I think it's very helpful to do it more than once, because the first time they took it, maybe they didn't understand it so well, or they've broken some precepts, and they really want to, now that they've grown in the Dharma, they really want to start afresh. And so for that reason, I think it can be helpful. But it's up to the individual, it's up to the different spiritual mentor. Okay? May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losong's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Duratna Mandala Kamniryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezig, may you stay until samsara ends. May the deeds of explaining and practicing the Dharma, done by groups supporting the teachings and their upholders, who spread the view of dependent arising and non-violent actions in the 10 directions, and especially at Sravasti Abbey in the West Florida.